G'day guys. I just wanted to make a quick video on making your own rock sliders for a Gen 4 Pajero. Mine is a 3.8 litre V6 NS 2008 model, but this pretty much applies to any model that's got side steps already. So you'll be able to fab these up for under about $200. I'll get into it. You won't need many tools. You need a hammer, an angle grinder, that's a 4-inch angle grinder, a couple of cutting discs, a grinding disc, an arc welder or a MIG welder, a pipe bender. The welder and bender I borrowed. You can hire them pretty cheap. Yeah, you don't really need much else, just some welding rods as well, or some MIG wire. To start off with, I've cut the original side steps off rather than unbolting them because I'm going to use the mounts. Obviously on a Gen 4 it's a monocoque chassis, which is it makes it essentially so that I couldn't find a better spot to mount the sliders to other than the original position, because obviously you got sheet metal pressed underneath and there's already a spot where those mounts are bolted to, and it's not a bad spot, so I'm using the originals. You could use some box tube to make up some more beefier mounts, but I guess for me it's not about making a set of sliders, it's about making a set of more robust side steps. And I've put a jack underneath the completed sliders, and I can jack the whole car up off these mounts because there's 3 of them on each side, which I believe is strong enough. So choose a spot where you've got plenty of meat. On the passenger side of your car, only on the passenger side actually, there's an L-shaped bracket, so I cut a couple of the rivets there and the one at the top, and then I've cut that open just with the 1mm cutting disc on the grinder, and that's I've gone back and cut the other 2. If you get the cuts right, they'll all be parallel and you won't need to shave any meat off these original mounts. What I did was weighed the tube that I was using. So I'm using 40mm NB pipe, and I'm using 2 pieces on each side, which weigh 6 kilos a piece. So essentially each side step weighs 12 kilos, give or take. So not because I fabbed up a set of sliders ages ago, and they were really heavy, and it was on a RD28 Patrol, so it was only 2.8 litre. It was turbo, but you could feel the weight in the side steps just when you bolted them on. So this time I'm going for a little bit lighter build. This is the tube, so 40mm NB pipe. It's about $60 for a 6.5 meter length from Medallion Steel, and yeah, so pretty cheap compared to, you normally pay over $1,000, maybe just a bit under, for a good set of side steps or sliders. So what I've done is I've just got the pipe there, and I've cut it to roughly what I wanted the length to be, and I've just put it up against the mounts just to check that if they aren't touching all 3 mounts and not in the position you want, then you need to either shave some meat off the mounts using your grinding disc. While you're there, just cut the pipe to length. So I pulled the rear in here about 1/2 inch shorter than the guard, and at the front I just pulled it back 1 inch from that front mud flap, which I'll be removing the mud flap anyway, but that's for later on. That's just another view. That's the where I notched out the mounts just by grinding a bit of a curve into the original mount, and I've just made sure that they're all touching the pipe and the pipe looks straight. That's just another view there. Next, we're going to tack weld the pipe onto the mounts. So disconnect your battery. I know you don't have to, and I always get comments like you don't have to do that. I know, but it's a good precaution because there's so much electrics on the Pajero. I didn't want any chance of frying anything, so took 10 seconds, undo the bolt, pull out cable tied out the way, and just put something protective on the terminal. Just popped a couple of tack welds on there. That's where the mount meets the pipe. And then after that, after I've tacked them, I undo the 6 bolts holding the original mounts in place, and now I can go to work making up the rest of the design. Don't worry too much about this bend in the pipe. I'll be giving you the dimensions for that later on. That's just, I was just sort of experimenting here with the shape and the length. And so what I've done is I've bent a second length of pipe, so it comes in 2 inches, it curves up, goes across, and then curves back in. Oh, that was me just trying to get my shape correct, and as you can see, it's not parallel with the body, so I had to muck around a lot with. I wanted everything to be nice and parallel and look good aesthetically. To do that, obviously just a milk crate brick, bit of offcut just to try and get the shape correct. And then I've just strapped it together using a couple of tie downs, and then I've welded the ends of that pipe onto the main length, onto the straight length. I'll refer to that as the straight length of pipe, and that's the curved or the bent piece. That just shows where it joins up, so that's 2 inches in from the end. And then I welded a couple of little 1.5 inch bits of square tube in just to give it a little bit of strength, but to me it was more a little bit about looks as well. Looks better with those two in place. And I put some 2mm plate on the end there. Basically I just cut a square out with the angle grinder, just tack welded it from the other side, and then did a full pass with the welder and then ground it back. I used 2mm welding rods, and I used a SIG weld weld skill arc welder, which can provide up to, I think it's 135 amp, but I just had it sitting on 100 because that's what the manufacturers for the welding rods recommended. That's the sort of basic slider, the shape and everything, and that's what it looked like once I put it in place. So with the bent bit, what I did was I measured in from the end 11 inches, and I made a mark with a paint marker. I made sure that the pipe bender I had, the center line for the die was also marked, so I lined them up. And this is just a super cheap pipe bender, which I think they're pretty cheap. They're like 180 bucks or something. Don't quote me. But I borrowed mine, so didn't pay for that. And what I did was, once I'd put the pipe into the die, I've done 40 pumps with the bender. So that's from the bottom position up to the top position, and then pushed back down is 1 pump. And I did 40 pumps to achieve that nice shape. Once I've done the 40 pumps, so you get the bend in place, I measured in 4 inches on the outside of the bend and 7 9/16 inches on the back side of the bend. Then I got a straight edge, and I just it's pretty much eyeballed it just between the two marks that I've made, so the 4 inch there and the 7 9/16 there, and then I made sure the straight edge was also parallel to that bar. I've just marked a line with a paint marker again and cut it, and then I've brought it in 2 inches from the end of the straight length, and that's where I want my pipe position to be to give it the nicest look. Calculating the length to cut the bent section on the other end was in the beginning. I was thinking, oh, I wonder how I'm going to do this, but it was pretty easily achieved because I realized that by the whole process of bending and cutting that pipe into that shape at the front end reduced the overall length of my original pipe by a certain amount, which was 11 centimeters. So at the other end, all I did was mark on the straight pipe that has the mount welded to it 2 inches in, which is where I want the bend bit to be welded on, and then I transferred that length across to the pipe, the bent section, and then I added 11 centimeters, so that once I cut it, bend it, and then cut it on the angle, it'll end up exactly where I want it, which was 2 inches in from the end. I had a little bit of a struggle, I guess, because I had 2 options. I could notch out the bent pipe, which is the piece on top there in this photo, or I could just leave it. And I decided to leave it mainly because I couldn't reliably notch out the same amount from each bent piece, and that would make the 2 bars not parallel. They might be on the lean. So I left it how it is, and then I just built up the weld. So I started at the left side, and I did a couple of passes like this to build up the weld to the other piece of metal. So that, I don't know if that helps anyone decide what to do there, but I liked building the weld up rather than notching out this bent piece, and then I might have notched out too much or too little on one side and not the other, and then it wouldn't be straight. It wouldn't be parallel with each other, which would look shit. These were the paint products that I used. I etch primed it. I went and got the whole lot sandblasted, and then I etch primed it as soon as I got home, and then I let the etch primer dry and put some of this Duplicolor bed armor on. That's the steps with the etch primer on. Just a couple different views. I hung them up on like garden hooks just to get them off the ground and a bit more room to spray them. This is just I got this from Super Cheap Auto, 2 cans for $40. I just I don't know why, I just thought I'd take photos of the instructions in case you want to check out what sort of process they want you to do with this stuff. All I can tell you is keep the can, if you use this stuff and you're spraying it, keep the can like at least 1.5 feet back from your slider when you start spraying, because it comes out thick and more of in a jet. It's not a jet, it's a very tight cone shape. If you have it any closer than 1 foot, it's just gonna go on and just run, and it's just gonna wreck your day. Have the can miles back before you bring it into the distance from your slider that you want. That's sort of the finish, which I thought was kind of cool. It's like a rubberized armor finish. I mean, this stuff is designed for a ute bed liner, so it builds up quite a high build, and it gives a rough finish. That's a textured finish. If you give it enough time to dry, it's not too sticky, the rubbery finish. Sometimes I do find people getting in and out of the car, it does leave like sand or like dirt marks on it, but as soon as you go and wash the car, it washes straight off, which is cool. And obviously, because I'm a terrible welder, I had to sort of use the bed armor to the rubberized paint to try and fill in some holes in my shitty welding. And that's them drying. Definitely recommend laying some newspaper down on the floor as well, because this stuff comes out so thick, it's unbelievable. I've never sprayed anything like it, and it goes everywhere. I got overspray on the floor, on the shed, everything. I had to clean it. Anyway, that's the finished product on my Pajero. I think it's a major improvement over the original sidestep. If I was to do it again, I probably would use some box tube to make new mounts up, but as a bit of an experiment, this is definitely a cheap improvement. I mean, it was definitely under $200. If I didn't get it sandblasted, it would have been under $100 for just the steel and some welding rods. So yeah, if you're thinking about beefing up your side steps, it's not a bad sort of cheap mod. I just need to get some bigger wheels now. I've got 2.5-inch lift on my Pajero, and so now I can fit 33s. These are only 31-inch tires, so that'll be my next little mod. Please subscribe to my video. Hopefully this gives you some ideas. Subscribe to my channel, and my next video will be I'm doing like a custom exhaust on this petrol, which should sound pretty good. That's just another quick view of the side step. Obviously it would look 10 times better if I was a good welder, but you know, you work with what you got. That's the driver's side. That's about it. Thanks for watching.